So, firstly, Karibu, welcome to Kenya. You just got a taste of what many of us living in Kenya have to deal with. We were just marching at the United Kenya Club, and we were marching up University Way, and we saw the police arresting people. Can you explain what happened and what you saw?
Well, first, one uniformed officer came. He was grabbing banners from the group. He grabbed some people. Then there were plainclothes officers. We kept marching, though, initially for a few minutes, and then a large number converged on us through tear gas grenades. We all ran in various directions. So it was a very interesting experience, but it just shows you how the system fears anyone, a relatively small group of people, expressing a difference about the politics of this country, especially during this summit where Kenya pledged this allegiance to France, a junior partner in imperialism.
And were you guys offering any threat to the people on the sidewalk, to the police?
No threat at all, honestly. It was very surprising, very alarming, shocking to see the level of aggression and the quickness with which things escalated. You know, like you just said, it goes to show how opposed this neo-colonial government and neo-colonial governments and neo-colonialist compradors everywhere are to clear, sharp criticisms of colonialism as it exists, because it continues to exist. So what is called a partnership, whether it's between France and Kenya, whether it's between the U.S. and Kenya being designated a major non-NATO ally of the U.S., these kinds of partnerships for the people, for the masses of people, are not partnerships. They're continuations of the colonial relationship, the colonial dynamic that exists between our people and those in power.
Sure. And whenever we hear about Kenya, we're always told it's a model of democracy. And in Africa, we have bad states that are dictatorships and good states like Kenya that are democratic. But surely the right to protest is a democratic right. Do you think that right was respected today?
Well, it definitely was not respected. It's interesting to try to define democracies through the lens of the West, because that's what they're trying to do. And the West, democracy is inextricably tied to neoliberalism. And so if you're a state that is amenable to neoliberalism, leverages policies against your people because they're invariably against people that are friendly to international finance capital, then you're a democracy. If you're a state that's trying to chart its own path and trying to do something for the people, and which also means at least some forms of socialism, some forms of even rejecting external investments, foreign investments and those kind of things, then you're not a democracy. And so, that's really what that is.
And we're hearing reports of a French citizen that was part of the protest that's just been arrested. Hearing reports, I actually witnessed him being thrown in the back of the van. Now, isn't it ironic that to celebrate a French Africa summit, we have a French citizen in Africa arrested for protesting the French Africa summit? What do you think?
I mean, I think it just heightens the contradictions of imperialism. I think it is our comrade who hopefully they are steadfast while they're being arrested. But it just shows that even with French citizenship, the neo-colonial state and the imperialist apparatus is against any movement, any people who show any opposition to it. So I think it's despicable, and we are going to be fighting for their release, and we are going to be showing solidarity. And it is the purpose of being here is to show our international solidarity, not only with the people of Kenya, but our people globally. And so we just want to remain steadfast in our stance of anti-imperialism, of internationalism, and we hope that our presence here in Kenya for these few days can do that.
Thank you. And Margaret, you all came from Black Alliance for Peace.
Yes.
One of my favorite Pan-African organizations. based in the US.
Yes.
But according to Emmanuel Macron, the real Pan-African, is him. What did you make of Emmanuel Macron's comments yesterday?
Well, it's very typical, arrogant, racist. I just want to add members of the Africa team of the Black Alliance for Peace, and also members of the U.S. South of Africa Network are here. But it was very typical of him as a person, typical of France and its racism. He was also very rude to people, said, oh, you need to be quiet, we can't, you have to lower your voices. But on the other hand, why shouldn't he be arrogant? The Kenyan president rolls out the red carpet for him to do these deals that are going to benefit France. None of this will benefit Kenya. Kenya will remain a vassal state. French corporations will have access to resources, and military can have bases. So why shouldn't he be arrogant when you think of it in that way?
Yeah, I mean, the argument is that some Kenyans will benefit, and there'll be those that are closely connected to William Ruto and his government, because we've had many of these agreements. We have a British-Kenya agreement, which provides 25 million to the Kenyan state to host a British army base, but the communities around the British army base are poor. So is this the primary contradiction? What is the Kenyan state? Is it the people? Is it the masses? Or is it the elite that controls the state?
Right now, the Kenyan state, as it operates, as we see in neo-colonial states all throughout the continent right now, and throughout the world, right? It's not just on the African continent, but we see it in Central and South America and the Caribbean. We see it throughout Asia. As Margaret mentioned, we're on the Africa team, and our flagship campaign is the U.S. Nairobi campaign, and we're specifically focused on the U.S. removing its military presence from the continent of Africa, just like we want the U.S. to remove its military presence across the globe, because these military bases that exist throughout the continent of Africa, throughout our Americas, right, in the Western Hemisphere, throughout Asia, West and Eastern Asia, right? This is a strategy towards global domination, right? Full spectrum domination over the globe, so that the U.S. is better to able protect the interests of itself as an empire, of the capital class that calls the shots world, right? So, and that's the case for neo-colonial governments like Kenya. It's a class of people that will stand to benefit from the so-called partnership, but it definitely is not the majority of Kenyans. It definitely is not the masses of Kenyans. So while partnerships like this take place, we see evidence of the masses not being supported by it, by the growing wealth gap that continues to grow, right? We see it by the worsening living conditions all throughout where we refer to as the global south, right? So the Kenyan state, as it stands right now, does not represent the masses, and that's why we keep seeing everyday people get in the streets, and organized people get in the streets to demand that the state begins to represent us, or that we take power and represent ourselves.
Imperialism is in crisis. It comes out of, if we think about imperialism, the day's imperialism, which is the exploitation, economic and basically the political, but the economic exploitation of the rest of the globe, the global south. It comes out of the legacy of colonialism. Colonial domination is what it means. So it doesn't understand cooperation. For them, and the foundations of imperialism and neoliberalism is competition. You compete, and you compete for dominance. And that's what's happening, and they're not winning that dominance, is what Comrade alluded to. They're losing that war of being able to dominate the world. And as a result, you have things like the Kenyan state being more repressive against its people, against its growing illegitimacy. You have things like France moving to the east of Africa because it lost ground hold in the Sahel regions. You have the United States, becoming much more militarized and warmongering because of its inability to compete with China and Russia and other economic powers. And so this is them in their desperation. And I think this is important for us to understand, that basically there it is a crisis of legitimacy. We, as the global South people, struggling people, have to organize and be able to take advantage, so to speak, of this crisis and understand the weaknesses that it has, because the better world is dependent on us being able to overcome imperialism and create something that's much more amenable to human existence and the planet. Cooperation and those kind of things, economic and political cooperation is really what's needed for us to survive.
Thank you. And you mentioned a good point at the end, crisis of legitimacy. And one of the ways they've tried to sugarcoat this deal is make it seem like, oh, it's great for the environment, they're going to plant trees. But when you look at they always say the devil's in the details. When you look at how this deal is going to play out, Kenya plants trees, France buys carbon credits, France uses those carbon credits for the industries in France. Meanwhile, here on the African continent, we're constantly told to not industrialize because the environment, can you speak to that contradiction within the deal, but also within the larger climate?
That's a good one. Now you're asking me a kind of thesis type question, but I think it's a very important thing that you mentioned here, because these carbon credits and these type of maneuvers that the industrialized world or the Western world plays when it comes to environmental and climate change, it's trying to maintain. It's the industry or the industries and the economy is dependent on fossil fuel emission and extractive industries, all these things that are not good for the climate. But we know what has to happen in order of anything substantial for climate change is the weaning off of these major industries that emit fossil fuels and these kind of things, and CO2s. They got to be weaned off of the type of things that they're doing that exacerbate it. And this means that the Western countries got to have major changes.
And just finally, in the speech yesterday, apart from calling himself a Pan-Africanist, he also had an opportunity to attack China and say that China is in the continent, is trying to keep states dependent on it while it extracts the resources. Now, bearing in mind that while France and Niger were cooperating with each other, Niger was the second poorest country in the world. Since it stopped its cooperation, Niger is now the fastest growing economy in Africa. Do you think Emmanuel Macron knows how hypocritical he sounds?
Yes, but he's depending on the people to not do their research. He's depending on people to be ignorant. He's depending on the people not to understand actually the real conditions of what is actually happening. That China is not, colonizing the continent, and that Niger is actually having a self-determinative path in building that for itself. So he definitely understands the contradictions, and he understands how hypocritical he sounds, but he doesn't care because he's an imperialist, and he has to maintain that facade.
Yeah, and I guess William Ruto doesn't care either. When he did the Haiti mission, he declared that a Pan-African project. So this is really my final question. Is this the new wave that, because Pan-Africanism is becoming more popular amongst the masses, that our enemies are now trying to co-opt it and call themselves Pan-Africanists?
Yes, I mean that's not the first time they've done this, and we have to be careful with our or just be cognizant of the fact that our language can be used in any way by anyone. So these people who want to exploit Africa will call themselves Pan-Africanists, which is all about African people in the diaspora working together to benefit everyone, to be unified, to prevent that exploitation that is coming, that has for centuries come from outside. So it's not really. It's so cynical, and it's really despicable to be the exploiter like Ruto. You can exploit Kenya, and I'm going to help you occupy Haiti, and then claim it's Pan-Africanist to do that. So we can expect more of that, but we have to have clarity about what it means and lessen the likelihood that these scoundrels will use that word for their own ends.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you.